Welcome to Byte-Sized Tech. Today, we are diving deep into the high-stakes chess match of our time, what's being called the Tech Cold War. What really happens when a single social media post can tank the market? And what does it look like when a new arms race is fought not with missiles, but with microchips and AI? Let's get right into it.
You know, this quote from Palantir's CTO, it really just cuts right to the heart of the whole issue. It's this idea that for one superpower to rise, another one has to fall. This is zero-sum thinking. It's the real engine behind this new kind of global rivalry, one that's completely reshaping technology, defense, and the supply chains we all, just take for granted.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we're going to trace the whole story. We'll kick things off with a sudden spark that basically lit the fuse. Then we'll get into the undeclared Cold War that's been simmering under the surface. From there, we'll look at America's big push to bring manufacturing back home, meet the new tech companies building the future of defense, and finally, we'll ask the big question, what does all this mean for preventing the next major conflict?
So, the first shot fired in this new conflict, it didn't come from a battleship or a silo. Nope, it was typed into a social media feed. Let's look at how one single message sent absolute shockwaves through the global economy.
Okay, so picture this. It's a normal morning, markets are humming along just fine, everything seems pretty stable. Then, bam, out of nowhere, a single post from President Trump goes live, canceling a huge meeting with China's President Xi. The reaction wasn't just fast, it was brutal. The S&P 500 immediately nosedived into the red, and the semiconductor index, which is like the pulse of the tech economy, it dropped 4%, just like that.
And here it is. This is the actual message that caused all that chaos. I mean, look at the language here. There's no subtle diplomacy, it's blunt. It calls out hostile behavior and flat out threatens a massive increase in tariffs. This wasn't just a tweet, it was a very loud, very sudden escalation of economic warfare.
So you have to ask, how can one post have that much power? Well, because it wasn't really just a post. It was like throwing a lit match into a room already soaked in gasoline, the gasoline of geopolitical tension. And that's what a lot of people are now calling an undeclared Cold War.
And at the absolute core of this conflict, you've got two worldviews that just could not be more different. On one side, there's the classic American perspective, a positive-sum world. You know, the idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. But on the other side, as our sources frame it, is China's zero-sum strategy, this deep-seated belief that for China to truly win, the United States has to lose. And this isn't just some abstract theory. It's a very real, very carefully executed long-term strategy. China has been using its industrial policy like a weapon. We're talking about imposing export controls on materials we all need, like rare earth magnets, pouring huge subsidies into their own industries, and driving what's called shutdown economics, where they intentionally price things to make other countries' industries totally uncompetitive. It's all designed to create powerful strategic dependencies.
Now, this long-game strategy has left the U.S. with a massive vulnerability, a real national security's Achilles heel. And that realization has kicked off a frantic race to rebuild America's industrial strength from the ground up.
Which leads us to the really urgent question that leaders are scrambling to answer right now. Just how deep does this supply chain dependency actually go?
Well, the answer is deeply concerning. We're not talking about a minor problem here. This dependency cuts right to the very core of the American economy and even its healthcare system. I mean, think about it. Half of all generic drugs, essential precursor chemicals, the rare earth minerals inside our phones and computers, and critical components for semiconductors, all of it relies on these incredibly fragile supply chains.
So the big response to this vulnerability is a major strategic pivot called onshoring. And this isn't just about bringing jobs back home anymore. It's being completely redefined as a central piece of national security. The basic idea is that for a country to be truly secure, it has to be able to make the critical things it needs to survive and defend itself, period.
This new reality, this focus on onshoring and strategic competition, well, it's created a huge opening in the market. It's sparking the rise of a whole new generation of defense tech companies that are built specifically for this new kind of challenge.
And look, to compete in this new world, the old way of building defense hardware just isn't going to cut it. For decades, the model was to build a handful of incredibly expensive, high-end things like fighter jets. But this new guard, they are flipping that script completely. Their entire focus is on mass-producing cheaper, smarter, more autonomous systems that are all powered by software.
And you can actually see this shift happening in the government contracts being handed out. The new startups are growing at a mind-blowing rate. But let's also keep it in perspective.
A single legacy giant like Lockheed Martin still pulls in tens of billions of dollars, completely dwarfing these newcomers in pure scale. So it's this classic story, right? The agile disruptors versus the entrenched giants.
So let's use Anduril as a perfect example of this insane growth. They're on track to hit $2 billion in revenue just this year. That's a staggering jump, doubling from just $1 billion the year before.
And that revenue? It's being driven by a crazy ramp-up in their production. We're talking a 400% increase in what they're building in a single year, as they go from just prototypes to mass manufacturing.
And of course, to make all that happen, you need the brightest people. They ballooned to over 6,500 employees, pulling in top engineers who are now choosing to build the future of defense instead of going to traditional big tech companies.
But this new guard, it's about so much more than just building better hardware. They are fundamentally rewriting the entire playbook for what deterrence even looks like in the 21st century.
So if the US can't compete on sheer industrial size, pound for pound, how does it win? Well, the strategy is to play a totally different game. It starts by just accepting reality, China's manufacturing dominance. Then you lean hard into America's unique asymmetric advantage, its world-leading software and AI. And the ultimate goal is to use that tech to give the American worker superpowers, boosting productivity so much that the US can compete and win on its own terms.
At the end of the day, the goal of this new arms race isn't actually to win a war. It's to build a technological advantage so powerful, so overwhelming, that a war never even starts. And that leaves us with the most critical question of all. This new generation of defense tech is in a flat-out race against time to rearm America. Will they be fast enough? If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.